I'm at the Tiny House Festival at Atlantic Station. There's a packed schedule today. Workshops on sustainable building practices, talks with reality TV show people, and food trucks everywhere. But the biggest, might I say, most massive draw are, of course, the tiny houses themselves. There are a number of them here, some for sale, some models that companies are willing to build for you, and all with lines of people of all ages snaking along 7 or 8 or 16 deep. And that's where I meet Freddie, who lives in Mapleton.
And I'm talking to people today about why they'd want to live in a tiny house.
Okay.
That's what they're trying to convince me of.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Freddie is a tiny house skeptic.
Yes.
I'm not sold. I'm not sold at all. I like space.
You have space.
Did you hear that? You have space? That's Dee, Freddie's friend. Dee's brought her husband and kids here today, too. Their family wants a tiny house.
Just really not living in excess, only having what you absolutely need, so then you can focus on what's important, which are experiences, which are people, which are the relationships. Traveling.
Have you seen the way I pack? Everything I do is in excess.
Right about this moment, Dee's husband walks up, and he's tall, like really tall, leading Freddie to comment,
Is he going to fit in a tiny house?
really, it's like I've walked into a TV comedy set. But it turns out that Dee's husband, whose name is Tony, is totally on board with the tiny house idea. Well, with a twist.
I could do it, but in addition to my actual house, vacation home or, in the backyard, yeah.
So he'd like a tiny house in addition to their regular house. Dee chimes in.
When my kids get bigger,
Right.
we can just get them their own tiny house. You can go next door.
Well, here in Metro Atlanta, around the region, they have passed laws that now make legal people to have accessory dwelling units outside, in their yards.
Yes.
So you could have a tiny house in your yard.
Well, depending on where exactly you live. And that is why we're here today. Because so many people I talked with at the Tiny House Festival said they're not looking to pack up their tiny houses to go live off the grid somewhere. They're just looking to put it in their backyard for visitors, renters, or family. And as today's guest tells us, that is the very definition of an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit.
It's that cute little backyard cottage.
Okay. Yep, that's really it. So I guess we're done for today. No, see, this is about a lot more than an adorable trend. It's about our growing population, for one. Remember how we learned in episode 1 this season how the Atlanta region is expected to add 3 million people by the year 2050? Just under 3 Birmingham's worth of people? Well, ADUs are one way our region is responding to all that growth. In recent years, several metro communities, including Clarkston, Decatur, East Point, Henry County, and the city of Atlanta, have passed ordinances allowing people to build ADUs on their properties. But of course, it's a lot more complex than that, too. Which I guess means it's time to cue that music. Welcome to What's Next ATL, powered by the Atlanta Regional Commission, where we explore the big new ideas shaping Metro Atlanta. I'm Kate Sweeney. We started out this season by asking a question: how do we build the communities we want? We began by seeing how this works on the large scale, how regional planners make the decisions that have major impacts, not just on our lives, but on those of generations that come after us. Then we zoomed in to look at how our cities and neighborhoods are reinventing themselves. Then onto the workplaces of the future. And now we're in your house. You've made it to the last episode of the season. Today, Living Small Goes Big. We talk with Will Johnston, Executive Director of Microlife Institute, about how ADUs, those cute little backyard cottages, could make a huge impact in Metro Atlanta. Oh, and we'll absolutely hear more from Freddie and Dee at the Tiny House Festival, too. Stay tuned. Meet Will Johnston. He's the executive director of Microlife Institute, a nonprofit devoted to educating people about the benefits of living small, including ADUs. The organization used to be called Tiny House Atlanta. And he has this tattoo that I asked him to explain.
Sure. So it's this little line.
Just a line across your forearm, and like a horizon.
Exactly.
And breaking that horizon are just 3 very small shapes: a tree, a mountain, and a house.
It's my happy line. And I thought it was going to be this big ordeal like this. I'm getting a tattoo. It's going to be an all-day ordeal.
And it took like 10 minutes.
Yes.
Will Johnston is all about simplicity. It's something that came up again and again in our conversation. And he says ADUs are kind of a deceptively simple fix to a number of challenges facing our region. What do you tell people? What is like your elevator speech for what is an ADU?
My first response is it's that cute little backyard cottage.
Okay.
Back to the early 1900s, like we had these structures. Like we didn't call them accessory dwelling units. They were the carriage houses. They were above garage units. I mean, they were built into a lot of our homes.
Call back to earlier this season. This was back in the days of the earliest pre-war suburban development we learned about in episode 3. In those days, you were more likely to see a carriage house back behind somebody's regular house.
So we are just trying to get what we did zoning-wise back to where we were. The tiny house movement, accessory dwelling units, it's all about utilization of space. And that space can be your backyard. It can be a plot of land. It could be within your own house, carving it out or redesigning it to be more functional.
More functional so that you can, say, have your parents stay in their community once they're older by moving into an ADU in your backyard. This is more than just a nice idea. It's a potentially critical one. Remember, in Metro Atlanta, 1 in 4 of us will be 60 or older by the year 2030.
There's a lot of baby boomers that don't want to go to the retirement home, and I don't blame them. Like, you want diversity. So you want 70-year-olds hanging out with 30-year-olds, hanging out with or watching the kids play in the park, so you need that general spectrum of age and class and interests. Accessory dwelling units allows someone who owns their house, who loves their parents and has the ability to build it in their backyard. So aging in place is huge because it also creates more walkability to people and it gives them that sense of autonomy.
Aside from people wanting places for maybe an older relative to live, there is an affordable housing factor at work here when we think of our communities. Can you talk about that? You're nodding, so maybe you know what I'm getting at.
We do need to add more quote unquote workforce type housing. So think of everyone from the barista to person just moving into Atlanta, like where can they go first or where can they live to be closer to work, easier walk, and just be a part of or just wanting to be a part of a cool neighborhood. There are a number of ADUs and garage apartments and carriage houses already converted in Atlanta. There's a plethora of them in the older neighborhoods. So that allows people, like say the rent's maybe around $800, $900 a month for maybe 500 or 600 square feet. So 2 people can live there, work close by and have access to Atlanta. And that's the biggest point.
And then I would think that also is beneficial to the renter as well, because you have that extra income and you can afford to stay in the neighborhood as well.
Exactly.
A note, folks, by renter, I meant, of course, the opposite of renter. That is the homeowner renting out the ADU. But Will Johnston seemed to know what I meant. Oh, and this could work for any metro community, not just the city of Atlanta. But you knew that. Moving on.
Perfect example. We just recently had the ABCs of ADUs tour in Reynoldstown, and one of our friends built the first permitted container home in his backyard, and it's 450 square feet, and his idea is to rent out the big house maybe for a couple of months, and get some revenue in, or then flip. When they need to have family over, they move back into the big house and rent out the ADU for a little bit longer term to allow them to, again, continue to have extra income. It allows the ability to stay where they are, as well as, pad their bank account a little bit more.
So there, some of the personal benefits of living in an ADU. You can afford to live in a neighborhood you might not have otherwise, or by renting one out, you can afford to stay there. Or you can live close to your kids, but not right on top of them, because we all like a little space. After the break, more on why Will Johnston sees this as actually an urgent matter for Metro Atlanta as a whole. That's when we return. Last week, we talked about how to create the workspaces we want, specifically about how to bob and weave in the new, ever more complex world of workplace automation. And we asked you, how much is your job affected by automation? Most of you, 75%, said you think automation will have a moderate impact, which may require you to do some retraining in order to stay competitive. Exactly a quarter of you said you don't see automation having any impact on your work. And of course, 75% plus 25% equals 100. It looks like none of you, 0, think that the impact of automation may require you to change fields. This week, as we talk about our homes and the potential power of accessory dwelling units to have a serious impact on issues like housing affordability as our population grows, we have a new question. Would you be interested in building or living in an ADU? As always, you can answer this question at the page for this episode at our website, whatsnextatl.org/podcast. Thanks. We're back talking about ADUs, those cute little backyard cottages that could help tackle some major housing issues, with Will Johnston of Microlife Institute. So we talked about how a greater number of ADUs could help out people seeking more affordable housing and also help us to stay in our communities as we age. But he says smaller housing options like ADUs also address another fact of life moving forward.
Our households are smaller. They were, so in the 1960s, the average American household was like 3.5 people for about 1,600 square feet. And now the average,
Wow. I just stopped and thought about that.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of blows your mind. You're like, 1,600 square feet seems like, whoa, that is so small. But now the average American square foot is about 2,600 square feet, and it's for 2.5 people. So we need developers, but we need thoughtful leadership in the development world to actually recognize, the households are smaller. We need to build to match that type of household versus let's just keep building the biggest thing that will make the most money. So now you're at this moment, you will not believe how many baby boomers are ready to sell their 3,000 or to 5,000 square foot houses. And there's going to be a lot on the market, and millennials probably aren't ready to buy them. So they're ready to downsize. There's no builder really building smaller spaces. The McMansion is winning because that's the only way a developer is going to make money, is by making it bigger and, squeezing every inch out of that plot.
Out of that plot of land.
Exactly.
So now he says we've got a problem. Too many houses that are too expensive with too much space for those who need them.
The average American household is 1 to 2 people, and that's 70% of America. Yet they're living in the McMansions, which have 4 or 5 bedrooms.
Which brings up something that planner types call the missing middle problem. When you have a wide variety of housing in a community, including houses and things like duplexes, carriage houses, and ADUs, then people at different stages of life and different income levels can all call that community home, without any one group getting locked out. The problem is, in much of Metro Atlanta, many of our neighborhoods don't have that middle type of housing, the duplexes and carriage houses and the like, which adds to our challenge of housing affordability. A quick but important aside here. Our housing affordability issues are complex in Metro Atlanta, and obviously there's no one-size-fits-all solution. But a group of regional partners, including ARC, have actually taken that complexity into account while developing a new approach to take the issue on. It's called the Metro Atlanta Housing Strategy. It's designed to help local communities better understand their housing challenges, and it suggests specific steps that local governments can take to improve housing options, from zoning to tax incentives to strategies to prevent eviction. It's extensive, and there's a lot more to it, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the strategy to kind of bookmark it in your mind. I have a feeling we'll return to it in a more in-depth way in an upcoming season. And in the meantime, you can learn more at metroatlhousing.org. But I also wanted to be clear. Metro Atlanta planners and leaders have their eye on this issue and, don't think that ADUs are the only solution. Although considering tactics like ADUs and smaller housing options are definitely on planning experts' radars. So to play devil's advocate, in the United States, are people comfortable with those smaller sizes?
And the answer is no, not yet. That's why we're around. I wholeheartedly believe that small spaces propel you forward. So think about it. So if you have a 1,000 square foot house, less maintenance, which you do, okay.
900.
900, perfect. So
no.
Not everyone agrees, but also I have to say, if someone was to build a 900 square foot today, it would be a much different design than how old is your house?
It's from 1952.
Okay, 1952. So it's box, 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 box.
Correct.
So the idea of flow and design was not happening in the 50s. It was all about let's create these small little nook rooms that does not allow you to have the best life. It's all about design and the way you interact with space.
I'd be happy to interact with just one more bathroom, just one more. But really, there's research behind this size stuff.
There was a study done, and they compared a 800 square foot house to a 2,500 square foot LEED certified Earthcraft type style home.
We looked into this. The study, actually done in 2010 by Oregon's Department of Environmental Quality, found that a standard 1,600 square foot house saves as much energy as a 2,200 square foot Energy Star certified home. Building small is good for the environment. It means fewer materials, less maintenance, and less to heat and cool. Plus, added bonus, less to clean. This I can attest to. But my 900 square foot house isn't a tiny house. Similarly, the guest house in your backyard isn't necessarily the same thing as an ADU. At least not legally speaking, which makes a huge difference in whether your local regulations allow for it. Johnston explains.
It's fascinating what definitions can do for zoning and building codes. If you are saying you are building a guest house in the city of Atlanta, you are allowed to build a guest house in every residential zone. Now that comes with rules. The rules for a guest house is you can't put a stove in it, and it can't be rented more than 3 months. So it really encourages, I think, a more Airbnb mentality of short stays, quick jaunts, and no long-term. That's really the big 2 rules. No stove, no long-term renting.
So that's a guest house made for guests who are temporary. And guest houses are permitted in far more communities than our ADUs, which are made for more long-term residents. The reason, Will Johnston says, is that not everyone likes the idea of their neighbors building ADUs in their backyards to rent out.
They use that whole thing of saying, we want to protect the culture that is here, and so it's fascinating because we do need variety. We do need the ability to diversify our housing options.
He says it all comes back to the benefits of having communities that are diverse in age, income, and life experience, and which are affordable to everybody. So we've talked a lot about the benefits of accessory dwelling units. After the break, the obstacles. I told you we'd check back in with our folks at the Tiny House Festival, so let's do it.
1,
We make it through the line and inside the tiny house.
7 steps from one end to the other.
And it's cute. It's got a little loft, a little stove. The feel is, as one visitor puts it, very farm-to-table-y. But what does our family think?
Oh my goodness, this is so nice!
Dee Dee and Tony, the couple with kids, they like it. Even the idea of staying there with their 3- and 5-year-olds.
I love the setup.
Yeah?
But the boys don't need all that height. They just going to bed up there.
Yes, and see, look, I can just sit up here and watch them while I have an adult beverage.
Watching the kids while drinking an adult beverage. That's living the dream, right? But what about our skeptic, Dee Dee and Tony's friend, Freddie?
Not for me. Definitely not.
Maybe not so much ready to commit to living in a tiny space with someone else.
I would get tired of being in this space with just myself.
But you work from
Then you go outside.
Look, your office is right there. You'll be
And the debate continues in one form or another about how up close and personal we're willing to get here in Metro Atlanta as we try to build communities that work for everyone. We're back with Microlife Institute's Will Johnston. So we've talked a lot about the benefits of ADUs. What are the obstacles to these actually getting built?
What people don't realize is the cost and the access to money. Those are the biggest obstacles for an accessory dwelling unit. If you want a customized space, that is more money. There are some groups like Atlanta ADU Company where they have A, B, or C. And they try to make it basic and functional as best as you can, but it's still around $80,000 to $90,000.
Yeah, you're building a house.
You're building a house, and building a house is expensive, especially the fact that you're building the most expensive. You're keeping the most expensive part of the house in this structure, which is the kitchen and the bathroom. So that's what again drives this cost per square foot up, and so people kind of get sticker shock.
So without getting too much into the weeds, if a listener wanted to determine whether ADUs are allowed where they live, how might they find out?
I would have a simple call to their planning department, whether it be county or city. If you're in the city of Atlanta, you are allowed an accessory dwelling unit in R4 and R4A as well as R5.
Quick note, these are all zoning types. The City of Atlanta has a website where you can type in your address and learn if you're one of these ADU-friendly zoning types. We'll have that web address as well as contacts for other metro communities and links to next steps for installing your own ADU, should you have the itch, all up at our website. And it turns out that ADUs can look a few different ways. They can be detached in your backyard, they can be connected by a breezeway, an ADU can even be a basement apartment. Anything that allows for two households on a single plot of land. No matter how it looks, Johnston says the ability to build more creatively in Metro Atlanta is critical.
We need to take a real look on how to create quality housing, not subsidized or anything, just quality, and get a plethora in, because that will drive down costs. Yes, be involved, but know that maybe there's a great neighbor they might get, and we need to embrace change. Change is inevitable.
Will Johnston, Executive Director of Microlife Institute, a man who's all for getting to know your neighbors. We've got a website. Did you know that? We do. whatsnextatl.org/podcast. That's where you can answer this week's listener question. Would you ever be interested in building or living in an ADU? And in case the answer is yes, or even no, that's also where you can find mad resources for this episode and all the other episodes in our How to Create the Communities We Want series. That's it for the show, and that's it for Season 2 of What's Next ATL. We'll be back with Season 3 and with some bonus content in the meantime, so keep it locked in. And tell a friend about the show, won't you? See you later.
Before you know it, you'll be used to it.
Now, the kitchen is cute. The kitchen setup is cute.
Well, just you and I, we can live in it.
On the weekends.
Because if you don't like me, I can always go on the other side.
I still have to see you and hear you breathing.
Blackness isn't just about race. I'm Deneen Milner, and I'm a New York Times bestselling author. On my podcast, Speakeasy with Deneen, I dive into the beauty and humanity of Blackness with people like writer Tayari Jones, journalist Demetria Lucas, and rapper Killer Mike. Listen to Speakeasy with Deneen from Georgia Public Broadcasting. Subscribe for free at gpb.org/podcasts or on your favorite podcast app.